please be careful if you are traveling, and be careful also if you are involved in transportation. This is David Toulis wishing well for those who are involved in the commercial use of the public right of way. Very important area. We have a great American economy, and people make their livings, make their profit, capitalize their clients by using those roads for a public good. And I've been reading a book by a couple of authors, one of whom a co-author here in Chattanooga at North Shore Fellowship. It's about the King's economy, and it is a very compelling discussion about how the Lord's Supper, which many Christian churches celebrate on Sunday, the first day of the week, has an overturning effect. It overturns men's systems. It overturns social hierarchies, and brings about a more equitable economy. Now, I want to talk about the word equitable because there is a great deal of discussion in the school board race about equity. Where does equity come from? And are the conservatives, are they, and the pro-family, small government people, are they right to understand the meaning of those using the word, the Unify Ed crowd, right to understand their use of that word in a new way? Well, probably so. Probably when progressive Democrats use the word equity, they have partly what's in view, I would say, in the scriptural ideal. But as usual, their means is always administrative solutions, top-down solutions. They are capital at that. Welfare programs, school programs, programs for children, programs for pregnant women, programs for minorities, for special programs for homosexuals and queers, and all kinds of special favors they want to have put into the economy, put into culture, top down. And they want to use compulsion and force to get it done. But and you say, well, yeah, that's right. That's what they do. Well, look at you, my listener here on 92.7 Nougat Radio. You're a conservative, and look at you. Do you not do the same thing that the progressive left does? Are you not really just quibbling with these progressives, trying to get equity in a different way, and using force to accomplish your end? And that is the Republican ideal. We'll have another program, and we'll bring equity to big business, right? We'll make sure that big business has even more friends in Congress and more friends in Nashville than it does now. And so the conservatives are also wanting the fruit of the gospel, again, taught on Sunday in any of 700 churches in Chattanooga. Probably some of it is faithful teaching, but probably a little bit of it, I would suggest, in Christendom, it provides for the professing believers in the pews, provides them a means of getting the work done. And I'd say that the work done, you could argue, goes kind of between the left and the right, between the Republicans and the conservatives, between the Republicans and the Democrats, between the progressives and the conservatives. I think the analysis on both sides that seem to make Chattanooga a riven city, right? We have two Chattanoogas, and the people who are analyzing this division, the haves and have-nots, and the wealthy and the influential, and those who are unable to get their driver's licenses renewed because of past court debt they can't pay, though there is relief in view for them with the Trauger Memorandum, which was covered in Chattanooga at Nuganomics.com. These divisions are, I'd say, often not justly analyzed. And so what I want to look at today, especially since we have questions for two school board candidates who are seemingly on the opposite side of the spectrum. One is Miracle Hurley, proposes equity. She is part of the Unify Ed plank, you might say, and then there's Joe Smith, the conservative, who is the incumbent, trying to keep his seat on the school board. And he has also an analysis of equity, and he lives his out. He lives out his idea of bringing justice and equity to young people by being a long time, you might say, community volunteer. He's a do-gooder with young people much of his adult life, and now is on the school board making, as we understand the school board to be making executive decisions about schooling, which I would say it partly is an idea. We have the idea that the school board really changes things and can affect improvements. And the reason I don't cover traditional politics is because I think that there really is very, very little power. It is a kind of a nominal power, and the decisions made are they are small and mostly, I might be wrong here, mostly not consequential. And I might be wrong. And if you should feel free to call me. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949, brought to you by Nuganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. So I've been thinking about my analysis of the Apex report put out by Unify Ed, which has charging behind it aggressive questionnaires for the candidates. And Miracle Hurley answered the questions, and also Joe Smith answered them as well. They're very driving, like being cross-examined by Carol Gaddy, perhaps in her hearing in Dunlap last week. You can read that story at Nuganomics.com too. And the story that it's funny. Look, the paper in Dunlap, the newspaper, does not cover that story. And people who want to know what's happening in that remarkable municipal authority abuse case have to go to an out-of-town source. That's me, David Toulis. And I do thank you for joining us here on the program, on the show, where we argue for local economy and the free market. That's my theme under the rubric that you should love your neighbor and buy local. Now, what is equity? Equity it comes back to there's a great volume that has had, I think, 3 editions. The first one probably starting in about the 1870s maybe, and it's by a lawyer named Gibson, and it's called Gibson's Suits in Chancery. And the early edition of that book has some remarkable discussions about justice and how it's attained. It is called equity, and we have in Hamilton County, in Chancery Court, we have this prospect of justice. Now, I mentioned Chancery Court, and immediately coming to your mind, since you've read the Chattanooga.com accounts of the Democratic effort to keep a Republican off of the ballot, that will be a conflict that will be going into Chancery Court. And by the draw, the case fell to Pam Fleener McNutt, and the issue in her regard is, will she recuse herself because she has had help from the candidate Robin Smith. She's had help, Robin Smith being a Republican activist, and has given $40,000 worth of consulting services to Pam Fleener McNutt in a bid for chancellor. But not the Chancery Court is a remarkable venue, and I would say is probably the best court in Chattanooga. And it's probably because the principles of justice that upon which it operates, and it operates on equity. And equity has we could say is problematic, especially to people with liberty interests. They can't assert their rights because claims of equity have entrapped them. And that's in that point I'm referring to, let's say, patriotic constitutional types who over the past several decades have just been ensnarled in courts that won't hear their pleas, won't hear their claims that the Constitution applies. And often the reason the Constitution doesn't apply to their cases and they can't get relief in court is because of equity. Equity has prevented the Constitution from applying to their claims. And that's so equity, I know, has a kind of a bad name among people who like constitutional government and who are trying to exercise their rights as free, more or less free people here in Tennessee and across the country. 800-8949, 800-8949. But the court that Pam Fleener McNutt oversees, Chancery, is about, and where Robin Smith's case is going, the Democrats' refund that were rejected in Nashville, and they're trying desperately to keep this conservative this conservative columnist and activist, and Robin Smith off the ballot. Robin Smith also was involved in the campaign for reelecting Jim Hammond, the sheriff. So she's very, she makes a living giving advice, and how to manipulate the public, how to advise, how to present yourself to the public, where to show up, where not to show up, which interview to grant, which interview request to ignore, that kind of thing. That's what Robin Smith has been doing. So now to get back to the court, Chancery is about equity. So what is equity? The people who go to church may have heard this. Now I know the New Testament seems to be the exclusive ground for the modern sermon. Probably most all the sermons that are uttered in Chattanooga come from the book of Ephesians, and that's about it. But I'm just kidding. In the Old Testament, there's the Ten Commandments, and the Ten Commandments are the 10 words, and there's a restatement of them, and you could say, are summarized best by the idea of lex talionis. And lex talionis is the word for equity, and it simply means, and you've heard this rubric before, probably in a sermon when you were a boy, maybe when you were my listener. I know you maybe not going to church now, but when you were in your dad's house, you heard about, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, limb for limb, stripe for stripe, wound for wound, and foot for foot, knee for knee. That rubric, that idea is simply this: that if there's an injury of a lost eye or lost tooth, the compensation has to be equal to it, not more and not less. That simply is called justice. Now, the Unify Ed people are using this concept of equity, and they are trying to make a more just society as they see it. And they are, they're Obama types, they're liberal Democrats, and they have in their analysis the need for more administration. And really, I'd say I'm very sympathetic to them as people, because they're going to be continually frustrated, and so will you, my listener, as long as you agree with them, right? And so long as you agree with I could say perhaps the opposition to that, which I've had people call me with grave concern about Unify Ed taking over the county, putting liberals in place, throwing out the traditional conservatives such as Joe Smith on the school board, and installing on the school board people like Miracle Hurlow. They're all young, they're all attractive, they're all smiling, they're media savvy people, and Joe Smith with his very dark tan and his shock of white hair, looking the part of a senior man who's part of Chattanooga that is the old school. And all right, so what are we supposed to make of this idea of equity? Is it ours or is it theirs, right? And I'd like to suggest that it really belongs to both sides. Okay? We got the conservative Republican on one side, kind of quasi free trade, kind of quasi liberty oriented, but that Republican also favors the police state. He favors wars overseas. He favors no liberty for Hispanics. He's really not a free marketer at all, right? He's not a free enterprise person at all. Your conservative is as dangerous to liberty and dangerous to the classical liberal theories that I have as your progressive Democrat. They're really friends. They're really brothers, perhaps you could say. Your progressive and your conservative. They both. Your progressive has the mammy state with an apron, and the conservative has the mammy state with a holster. Okay, a holster with a Glock 9 in there with the 16-round clip, and maybe an extender, putting it up to 25 rounds or something like that. All for public safety, right? And so what we really want to have here is to be better than them. You, my listener, and I on the David Tula Show, to be better than them. So equity is something that the left wants, and Democrats and liberals and people who love Edward Kennedy and people who love Bill Clinton, willing to overlook all of his his rapes and his abuses of females. They want equity too. The question is, though, how can we really get there? And the right, well, they say they want it as well. They want justice. They want the Constitution to reign. They want freedom. They say they want an end to heavy taxes that force almost everybody to have two jobs, right? No one can make any savings. and I think people want the right thing. They do have a sense of justice, but how do we get there? Now, the question is, I don't think going to be answered well by either candidate. I'm afraid. I mean, we'll find out right here on the David Tulis Show. We'll find out what is the best answer. And the candidates will. Trust me, they're going to be giving things in pencil. It's all just in pencil. A, to win votes, and B, because they're thinking through the issues too, and they don't have all the answers because they're not in office. And so, well, here there was a case that was decided by the Supreme Court last week, and I just wanted to mention something about it, and it touches on the question of good faith, a thing called good faith. Now, you say, well, what on earth are you talking about? Good faith that's just more Sunday school lesson from David Tulis. Well, no, not really. The High Court is talking in this decision. I've done a cut and paste on it. It's a ruling about having a mistake that an official makes. The question in the issue was a double murder. A woman killed her children, and did the officer who didn't make 2 exact copies of the warrant, because he printed the thing out on regular paper rather than legal paper, and a line got dropped off, a line that he was supposed to sign. Did he act in bad faith? Did he act in such a way that required the exclusion of the evidence that was essential in bringing a conviction of this woman? And the answer is that no, he didn't make a mistake that was fatal. That was fatal to the case, because he acted in good faith. It was a good faith mistake that he made, and so the judges said, did the exclusionary standard apply, or did it not? And it says, when a magistrate has issued a warrant in compliance with constitutional requirements, but in good faith fails to comply with Rule 41's technical requirements of 3 exact copies, societal interests are not advanced when the exclusionary rule applies to exclude evidence obtained from execution of the warrant. So you get that? You had to have that warrant fulfilled, and what was found in that warrant was essential for the conviction of this woman. And the judges go on to say this: although the term good faith is not subject to precise definition, a good faith mistake is one characterized by simple, isolated oversight or inadvertence. Okay. And it goes on to say a good faith mistake does not include conduct that is deliberate, reckless, or grossly negligent, nor does it include multiple careless errors. Furthermore, where a finding of good faith depends on the credibility of one or more witnesses, the trial court should set forth its assessment of that factor to facilitate appellate review. Okay, that last sentence was not necessary for you to hear, but I just want to make sure. So I read it. David Tulis here, 800-8949, 800-8949. Now, the question is this. We have reforms that are needed in Chattanooga. We are calling here at 92.7 Nooga Radio for police reform, okay? Well, we're calling for police reform on several areas, and one of them is the transportation statute, about which I've been making a bit of noise. And that quote that I'm reading from the good faith ruling from the High Court Friday, I will be mentioning that to Sheriff Hammond. I'll be mentioning that to Andy Burke, who is in charge of the police in Chattanooga. There are reforms that require good faith. So that's really what we want. We want good faith action by officials who, or of whom we have high expectations. Well, what are we expecting from them? Well, I'd say probably we want them to bring about opportunities. Okay, we want them to make changes that are opportunities for people like you and people who are common people who are, you might say, the subject of these rules, right? We're going to talk with Eric Adkins of Unity Group about his take on some of these important matters. What is good faith? What needs to be done in good faith and not in the opposite, which is called bad faith. David Tulis, we're going to talk with Eric Adkins to see where to go. David Tulis. 3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
One man killed.